So a little bit about today's agenda. This is just kind of what we're planning. Determine what to plant, when to plant in the spring. I'll show you a really great resource that we have from NC State Extension. It's one that I use and recommend a lot. We're going to talk a little bit more about garden preparation. I talked a lot about this in a previous class, but we're going to hit on it again today. So I don't think any of you already were in those previous classes, so it'll be good information for you. I'll share a little bit about a few of my favorite cultivars that are out there that are pretty new and tell you where you can get seeds and purchase seeds for those. And we'll hit a little bit on pest management. And today I'm mainly focusing on organic pest management and organic gardening practices. So when we're talking about amendments to the soil, we're not talking about fertilizers. I can give you those recommendations if you want, but everybody that I've had in class so far has asked about organic recommendations, and that's the route I want to go. And that's something that's good. You know, a lot of people like the organic practices. And whatever you want, we're here to provide the information. So if you want the conventional, that's fine. If you want organic, we'll give you those organic practices as well. Let me move this bar off the screen for everybody in the room, if I can get it to move. There we go. All right. And then at the end, we'll answer any questions that you may have. This is the first time I've done this class for spring garden crops. I had some interest from some surveys, and some people asked me to offer that. So feel free to offer suggestions, you know, at the end of the class and on the survey. If there's any topics that we have not done that you would like to see, of course, indicate those on the survey or let me know, and we'll have those in the future. But where do you start planting the spring garden? Well, this is my go-to source. It's very easy. You can do any Google search, web search, whatever search engine you use. Search NC State WNC planting calendars, the easiest way to go. I do have the link to a PDF. So we have this in printable form. If you all, before you leave, you want to get the paper copy of this, there's some in the hallway on this wall right down here to the right. They're available, but it's also online as well if you lose a paper copy. And then Sandra, you can go online and check this out. Our planning calendar, if you've never seen it before, it's a great resource. I'll show you on the next slide what it looks like. It's a very easy to understand format. So basically it just lists a bunch of different crops. It's not just for the spring, and it gives you planting dates. And you can use this year round. So in our area though, right here is the biggest area of concern. So this planting calendar is fixed for Buncombe County. Predominantly Asheville. We're a little higher in the mountains, so what I say is on these spring dates, add about 5 days to your summer crops. Now, a lot of our spring crops in March and April, that's okay. We're pretty close to Buncombe County until you hit this May date. And basically in these higher elevations, Buncombe County, they'll tell you their last frost date is probably around May the 10th. Our last frost date's a little later than that. We have had hard freezes May the 20th, but that's kind of an anomaly. That's not the normal practice. But around May the 20th, May the 15th is when you plant most of your summer crops here. That's kind of your earliest date. And I've seen a frost on May the 10th, pretty regularly, actually. So things that won't necessarily be injured by frost, you can plant by these planting dates. Things like cabbage, onions, carrots. I'll give you a list of different things here in just a minute. But a lot of those early season crops that won't necessarily be killed by frost, they may be nipped a little bit, but they won't be killed by frost. A hard freeze would kill them in most cases, depending on, you know, if it's transplants, how hardened off the transplants are, how tender they are, those kinds of things. The assumption in here on a lot of these planting dates, for instance, if you look at cabbage on this planting calendar, it'll tell you that the earliest planting date is March the 1st. That planting date is assuming you're going to cover. Okay, so keep that in mind. Some of these very early crops, lettuce, onions, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, a lot of these really early season crops, when it says a March 1st planting date, they are assuming that you're going to cover with some form of cover early on in the season. Around April 1st, you can plant and most of the time be okay. If you're going to have a frost event go out, you can cover some things. So you can plant in a small enough area where you can add a row cover or a blanket. Just make sure if you do cover, that cover goes all the way to the soil. I've seen those pictures where they were covering fruit trees and they basically wrap the top of the tree. And that doesn't do you any good because it's actually the heat of the soil that keeps the frost from damaging the plant when you cover. So whatever you cover with needs to go all the way down to the soil level. And I always tell people if you're covering plants, it's better for it to look like a ghost than a marshmallow popsicle. And the assumption is that you use a white sheet. So, but we'll continue on here. Here are a few things. If you look at that guide, and I'm just pulling out some things that I would plant in my early season garden. This also tells you when you see a T in this, that's transplant. If you see a TU, that's a tuber. B is a bulb, S is seed, T is transplant, C is a crown. So like there's only a few things with crowns. Asparagus, for instance, you don't really plant seed, you plant crowns. So when you go down that list, it'll actually tell you what's recommended on these dates. There are some things that you can seed March 1st, but they don't recommend transplants until April 15th. So do pay attention to that when you use this calendar. So back to those planting dates, I just went through and pulled various things. I can tell you what I plant in my garden on here, if that's any help. I definitely plant peas, I definitely plant potatoes, I plant radishes. I usually do my turnips in the fall. I think where we're at, they do a little better in the fall. However, if you want turnip greens, this is, there's varieties that just like 7-top, for instance, there are varieties that are known for their greens. So if you like turnip greens, plant them in the spring, seed them in the spring, and then harvest them. But I typically plant my turnips in August, September, and then I'll harvest them in the spring. If I can beat the worms and various things that eat the turnips. I just plant enough of them where I'm going to get some, no matter what. Spinach, I plant in the spring. Celery, I plant from transplants. Now, this is one that you're not going to find very many transplants. They're not that readily available in garden centers. And so there's a couple things you can do. If you can find somebody to grow transplants for you, maybe somebody who sells plants at the farmer's market, you know, a local grower, you purchase seed, make a deal. Hey, when you start your early plants you're going to sell, I'll give you the seed and you plant this for me and I'll have celery available. But celery is something that grows really well here. I grow this year, I'm planning on growing about 500 celery on my farm. It does grow very well. It does really well here. A couple of different varieties that I'll recommend to you later. Arugula is something that you can grow pretty much year round here in Yancey County. Onions, we can grow those year round. Mustard, that's like mustard greens, pretty much you're looking at spring and fall seeding. And that's another one that I usually grow more in the fall, but you can do a spring seeding and get some early greens out of it if you like them. There are certain types of mustard that'll grow in the summer. What I usually recommend is the mustards that grow in a couple lettuce mixes. So if you like a spicy salad, go ahead and grow it in with a mix. Leeks, of course, leeks are very similar to onions. There are several different leeks that we can grow in our area. Usually those are from seed. You can get transplants for those. But you're looking at April 1st typically as the earliest seeding date. Your cold crops, this is things like broccoli, kale, cabbage, cauliflower, all those types of plants. If you think about the things that you see together, the plants look a lot alike, especially when they're early seeded. You can buy broccoli plants right now at a couple of greenhouses here locally. I know Troy's probably has some broccoli plants and cabbage plants and cauliflower ready right now. I know Davis Farms has cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli available, and there are probably others. When the farmers market opens up here, I think they're opening up on April 13th. There'll probably be some growers there that have cabbage plants and broccoli plants for sale. Carrots we do from seed. This year I tried something new in my garden. On my farm, I tried seeding some fall carrots. We'll see how that goes. They look pretty good right now. The only thing, I'm not getting very much top growth because of the winter. I didn't cover them or anything. Just seeded them, let them grow. They grew all winter. They didn't get any cold damage. I had more damage from the dry. The seed didn't germinate last fall. But I'll have carrots this spring that I planted last fall. And so that makes for an early harvest date. But I will have carrots that I'll plant here in a couple weeks. I don't plant because I'm shooting for a certain market, but you can plant carrots as early as March 1st here. And of course, cabbage, that's the one that I was telling you, if you plant it March 1st, you're probably going to have to cover to protect from the cold weather. We have some pretty cold temperatures in a lot of years through about mid-April, which is usually like a freeze type event. I mean, just last week we got down to 22. And if you had cabbage plants out there and it was for more than 2 hours, if you had cabbage plants out there unprotected, if they were fairly tender and recently transplanted, worked hardened off very well, those cabbage plants would have probably been killed last week. If they were very hardened off and acclimated to the weather, they would probably have been okay. So that's where you get into that, it depends. So to be on the safe side, if you purchase plants or grow your own, especially early, go ahead and cover them if you're trying to plant really, really early. There's a lot of interest in intercropping in the garden. You have a small area, you can grow more with less space. Intercropping is a great idea. So for instance, this is a picture of some head lettuce that's grown in between tomatoes to make use of this bed. You have a 3-foot wide bed, plant your tomatoes toward the outside, plant head lettuce, carrots, greens mix, that kind of thing inside of the bed. Make very good use of that space. That's perfectly fine. Like your tomato plants though, you don't want to plant them closer than 18 inches and preferably like 24 to 36 inches in a raised bed situation is better because of disease, and airflow. But be careful if you're thinking about intercropping and you're wanting to plant lettuce. Lettuce is not too bad, but there are some things, if you want to try to intercrop it and you planted, say you planted kale early and you were wanting to plant something else that had a bigger plant, you're intercropping, I don't know what that would be, but just something that takes up a lot of space. Just keep in mind that your main crop, which in this case would be tomatoes, if you grew a really big spreading plant or whatever, and you got that established a month ahead of time, it had a month on that tomato, it may create some competition issues for your tomatoes. So just be mindful of that. With a lot of the intercropping, if it's something that I know is going to be small, it's okay. But a lot of times when I'm wanting to intercrop in beds, I'm going to plant the 2 crops at the same time, whether that's transplants or seed. I'm going to plant them the same day. That way, I'm not worried about that competition. So just that's just a concern. Just keep it in mind. Think about it, consider it before you do it. There's a lot of theories out there right now about intercropping. It's not a lot that we have a lot of research about. And the idea is going back to the 3 sisters, the corn, beans, and squash. We found out in some cases where intercropping, there's no problem with it, especially for homeowners in raised beds. There's some other instances where it don't work so well. There's sometimes where it would work okay in a home garden, and it's not necessarily going to work as well for a farmer that's trying to produce for sale, where, quantity matters. So just keep that in mind that there's not a whole lot of research out there about intercropping. There's a whole lot of theory. And there's a lot of people that present their theory as if it's factual based stuff, especially if you go to Dr. Google and you go to YouTube. So just be mindful of that. And so I throw that slide in there, especially for these spring crops. But there's a lot of things you can intercrop. Right now, you can plant green onions and lettuce together in the same bed. So a little bit about preparation. This is a focus on raised bed. The one thing I'll say about this when you're starting with new beds, if you don't start with good soil, you're never going to be able to amend it the way that you need to. And what makes good soil? So a lot of times if you purchase topsoil from a contractor, so somebody who's went in to build a house and they've taken up the topsoil, now they're selling the topsoil. Nine times out of 10, that's going to be a heavy mineral soil. And if you test it, the cation exchange capacity is going to be down in the nines, 8 nines, maybe 11. And what that means, what that tells me is that's not really a topsoil. It's going to be mixed in with a lot of your mineral based, your underneath soil, your underneath layers. It's going to be low in organic matter, and it's not the best for beds. I've seen some of it, people put it in beds and it's set up like concrete. And that's what you don't want to have, is that kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? So there are a lot of good mixtures out there. I'm a Big Daddy Pete's fan because that's what's available locally. It's available in a couple locations. There are a few places where you can go get a raised bed mix, and it's not a bad product. This is a raised bed mix. There's also the lawn and garden soil. Either one of those is what I would recommend for your base soil in a raised bed garden that you're constructing, a new raised bed garden. What I also recommend is to top this off with 2 to 3 inches of mushroom compost and work it in before you plant, and then a little bit. So this mix, this raised bed mix, has dolomitic lime already in it. You might want to mix a little bit with this lawn and garden mix. But what I've seen and what I've tested, the pH of this lawn and garden mix is usually in the 6.5, 6.3 range. This mix right here is in the 6.8 range. I mean, it's almost perfect. In a traditional garden setting, unfortunately, if you're going to do a lot of early season crops, now you think about our weather. We don't get very many days where the soil is dry enough to till in a traditional garden setting between January 1st and March 1st. All right. So I've gone to recommend and plow the garden in the fall. Now, what that kills is any kind of cover crop. So what I would recommend is the area where you're going to put your spring crops, go and till that, plow that in the fall. Leave your cover crop for things like your tomatoes or your later crops, because we have a lot of days between March and May that we can work soil. I could work it pretty much all week this week until today. So go ahead and plow in the fall. If you're doing a new garden plot, a grassy area, definitely plow in the fall. You're going to have to do that to let all that break down, all that material break down. When you get those few weeks in February, go ahead and start tilling. Till that up, start working it up, especially if you're going to do some seeding. Onion seeds are tiny, celery seeds are tiny. You've got to have a pretty good raised or a pretty good seed bed there. So you may want to go ahead, as soon as you get a dry spell where the ground is dry enough, the soil is dry enough there in the spring, go ahead and start tilling and start working that up. As you do that, you can add composted manure. You can add compost. You can add leaves. You can add sources of organic matter and till that in. And then that process of that breaking down will occur. If you can get in there in February and you've got a good month or two before you plant, you're going to be in really good shape. So you can add organic matter and really improve your garden plots. And that's really what you need to do if you're going to grow organic and do organic gardening. Because when you're doing organic gardening, you're thinking of the soil in a matter of a longer period of time. You got to take care of that soil. So in a traditional garden plot, you have what you have to work with, right? You've got your soil that's there. You can amend it. That's really the only option you have. Raised bed soil, you're bringing in your soil, so you can control the quality of what you're using. But you do need to find seed bed for many of our spring crops. So just make sure it's worked up well enough for that seed when you go to plant it. Also, soil test. Soil test, don't guess, all right? I put a picture up here. This is a copy of the soil test report. This is our form that we use. You can check out a probe from our office. Soil testing is free from April to December. From December through the end of March, it costs $4 a sample. It's worth it. It is worth it. What's a soil test going to tell you? It's not going to tell you if you have any chemicals in your soil. It's not going to tell you how much nitrogen. I mean, they'll have a recommendation for nitrogen, but they're not testing for nitrogen. We're primarily testing for three things. I'm looking at maybe four on the soil test report in most cases. So first off is pH. That's right there. You can't really see that very clearly on the screen. But pH, it's also, this bar is your pH range. It gives you the optimum range for whatever crop you indicate on the soil test report. For the homeowner form, most of the time this is going to say vegetable garden for vegetables or flower garden or tree, apple tree for orchard, whatever code you're putting in there. And this first bar right here is always going to be your pH. It's going to have the optimum for that crop that you indicate. Say you put the wrong code in and your soil test report comes back and it says lawn non-centipede, or you didn't put a crop code, and they're going to test for the first thing on the sheet. Unfortunately, that is a lawn non-centipede grass. That's what they're going to test for if you don't put in the code. The pH range is still pretty good for vegetables with that, so I'm not worried about that, but that is going to impact our phosphorus and potassium index over here. And so if that ever happens, all you have to do is call me, tell me you got your soil test report, you put in the wrong code or something happened, they tested for the wrong crop. I can pull up your soil test report and I can translate that for vegetable crops. I just say that because I've had that come up like 10 times this spring where folks soil tested the first time and they didn't put in the right code, or they didn't put in a code and they just tested for the first thing on the list. But our pH for vegetables, we want it to be between 6.3 and 6.8 in most cases. For potatoes, I like it in the 5.8 to 6.3 range. But everything else, 6.3 to 6.8 is your ideal range. You can see on this report here, it's above a 6.7, that it's above that optimal range. So is that a problem? pH is a 6.9. Is that a problem?
Yes.
It's not.
It's not?
It's not. No, that's going to correct itself.
Okay.
If it said 7.2, is that a problem?
I don't know.
No, not really. If it says 7.5, you're getting into some issues. Okay. I've seen some soil tests from some raised beds. I had a lady in here day before yesterday was Monday. She came in yesterday, called me, looked at my soil test report. I said, tell me how you've managed your bed. Well, I put lime in it every single year. She had a pH of almost an 8. It was a 7.9. Okay, so that's why I say soil test. Not only did she waste the money on the lime, putting it in every year and putting too much when she didn't need it, that pH range, vegetables grow really well with that 5.8 to really 6.9. That's your ideal. The textbooks will say 6.3 to 6.8. That's your optimum range, right? When you get below a 5.8, nutrients will be limited to the plant. They won't be, it has to do with the soil chemistry. When you get above a 6.9, 7.1, 7.2, nutrients start to become limiting to the plant.
So are we on the, I always get them switched. As the numbers get higher, are we getting more acid?
As the numbers get higher, you get more basic.
Oh, okay. So high numbers would get more
alkaline. Add lime to make it more basic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your nitrogen fertilizer or adding sulfur will make it more acidic.
Okay. And that number will go down when you add sulfur.
Yeah, I don't recommend adding sulfur unless you're up there in that 7.8, 7.9 range, because it's going to come down. It's going to naturally come down.
I have a sulfur question related to wasps, but I will leave it
all right. The other thing we're looking at on the soil test report is the phosphorus and potassium index, and it'll tell you this is also based on crops. Some crops need more. For instance, squash, cucumbers, they need a lot more phosphorus. Sweet corn, it needs a lot more potassium. Tomatoes need quite a bit of potassium. And so these numbers will change depending upon the crop that you indicate on your soil test. And you look at this bar is the same way. It'll tell you the number beside of that for potassium and phosphorus. It'll give you an optimum range. And basically the way they give a recommendation is a low, medium, high. So depending on how far this bar is from optimum is the recommendation they're going to give. If it's in this optimum range, they probably won't recommend any phosphorus or potassium. If it's in that low range, they have different recommendations on the soil test report. The recommendation is actually right there. And if you'll notice, it'll come back and it might say something like 5 pounds of 2100 per 1,000 square feet. I've seen that one a lot. That is a low phosphorus, a low phosphorus, low potash recommendation, low potassium recommendation. If you go to the very back page of this sheet, if you want to put conventional fertilizers, you'll find in that list, all you have to find is, I know 2100, it's the first one listed. It's a low phosphorus, low potash. You can go down that list and there'll be 3 or 4 more products listed there. And there'll be one, and it's probably going to say like calcium nitrate, 15.500, or ammonium nitrate, 2200. So that's a conventional. If you want to go organic, and you need organic amendments, and it says 2100, the only thing I need to add is nitrogen. I'm probably looking at something like blood meal. I'm going to supplement with blood meal. If you look on the blood meal package, now this varies between company. It varies. Again, you're talking about natural products, animals' diet, all that kind of stuff. I've seen blood meal with analysis of 1800. I've seen blood meal with an analysis of 800. If you go to Walmart, their blood meal is probably 12 or 1300. If you go to Home Depot, theirs might be 1600. And so I can't really say add so much blood meal. I have to know that relevant analysis.
And can you give us the organic source for phosphorus and for the third one was magnesium with it? Or
so it really depends on where those numbers are at. For the organic source, there's lots of different sources. Bone meal is going to be a big one for phosphorus. That's my straight up recommendation.
Like fish bone or any bone?
It's just going to be called bone meal when you go to purchase it. Just going to be called bone meal. It's going to be around 24% to 48% phosphorus, depending on the company you get it from. And if it's fish or cattle or whatever, it changes. It changes that phosphorus ratio. The product for potassium, there's several out there, but my go-to is green sand. And that's because it has the highest analysis of any of those. There are some organic fertilizers out there. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But one thing that I will tell you on all these organic products, organic fertilizers are a little bit different because they're blended to be the most like a conventional fertilizer. They're also the most expensive. Something like blood meal, bone meal, feather meal, some of those products, the analysis is going to be across the board, but those naturally derived products, they're like a fertilized bag. I know when I put 5 pounds of ammonium nitrate on something, that 5 pounds is going to be 21% nitrogen. About half of that nitrogen is going to be used in 45 days in the nitrogen cycle.
Right.
It's going to be released. It's already in nitrate form. Plant's going to take it up. It's gone, right? When I put something out like blood meal, though, it has to break down. And so I may put out that amount, but it may not be readily available. It's longer time. So when you're thinking about this soil test report, you really need to be thinking about 3 years. What I'm putting out here now, I'm amending for the next 3 years. And think about it in those terms. If you're really, really low on phosphorus or potash, for instance, you may want to soil test every year until you get those levels in a good range. And once you kind of get that, you can add you can add compost, you can add composted manure, you can add lots of different things to supply some of these nutrients. But it is a whole lot harder for me to give you a recipe with those products. So it's almost like a guess and check, really. A soil test doesn't test for nitrogen. It doesn't include nitrate. And so I just put this up here. Most people that are organic gardening, and they've been doing it a while, they understand when you're doing organic gardening, it's not necessarily the recipe of adding the nutrients, but I always say you're feeding the bugs. You're feeding the good microbes. And the best way to indicate this is through the nitrogen cycle. And if you've ever done any kind of science or whatsoever, my wife teaches this to 7th grade. And this is actually the thing she pulls off the internet to teach the nitrogen cycle. But you see, you get free nitrogen. Most of our atmosphere is made up of free nitrogen, right? Nitrates. Or not nitrates, but in the atmosphere, My brain's gone, I'm sorry. But you have free nitrogen in the atmosphere. If you things like lightning strikes, you know, you can have that nitrogen that goes into the soil there. Also, nitrogen fixing bacteria, they'll fix nitrogen out of the atmosphere and they'll convert it. It'll be in the soil for nitrogen fixation around nitrogen fixing plants like clover, for instance, or alfalfa. Of course, animals, they consume grasses. They put nitrogen back in the soil from their manure. But all this is because of microbial processes, right? Microbes. Anaerobic decomposition predominantly. The same thing that drives your home compost pile. That's what's going on in the soil. So you can think about this as in the soil, this is soil composting in a way. And so when you add nitrogen, you're basically jump-starting the microbial population. And you're doing that so that the most nitrogen is available at critical times for your plants. Okay? That's what you're doing. So when I'm saying add from your soil test report, it's going to tell you what to add pre-plant. It's going to tell you to add 2100 or blood meal or whatever. You're adding that pre-plant because those critical times for your plants are two different times, right? Initial growth. This is the one that we're paying attention to from a soil test. When those plants are beginning to grow, roots are forming, leaves are forming, stems are growing, flower parts are being produced. You know, that plant's just starting to grow. It's a young plant. You need a lot of nitrogen when those plants are young. You need it released in the pretty heavy forms. And so just talking from a conventional sense, one of the reasons if I go out and I apply a bag of calcium nitrate and I add that much nitrogen, it's going to be readily available in 45 days. I'm doing that to make this process, to give that plant everything, all the nitrogen that it needs to develop those roots, develop those leaves, develop those stems, and do it as quick as possible, right? I want as much nitrogen as I can available because I want that plant to not have any limiting factors when it comes to nitrogen, all right? The stage that often gets ignored in home gardens is this reproductive stage. Now, if you just go by your soil test and you just put the product or you meet the need, say it says 2100 and you look and you've got a 13% bag of bone meal and you add that in, the 2 pounds per 100 foot or whatever it comes out to be to meet that 2100 recommendation, supply the recommended nitrogen from that soil test, you're going to do really well here. The plant's going to grow well early in the season. When it starts to make fruit, however, and I'm thinking of more your long-term, lettuce, not so much an issue. Onions, unless you're doing bulb onions, not so much an issue. Our short season crops, most of our spring crops like that we're planting in very short windows, this is going to take care of those. I don't have to side dress lettuce. I don't have to side dress onions that I'm growing for green onions. I don't have to side dress a lot of different things. Cabbage, that's more of a long season crop. I may need to side dress it to get the size or the quality that I'm looking for. But a lot of our other crops get in this reproductive stage. They're going to produce fruit. So you think of tomatoes, squash, those kinds of things. Some of those longer term, cabbage, broccoli, broccoli's getting reproductive when it's making that broccoli head. And it has a huge need for nutrients, predominantly phosphorus and potassium when it goes to making a head. Boron is another one that's really, really essential nutrient for broccoli. So if I don't have that available at this reproductive stage, my production is going to be limited. I'm going to end up with smaller size fruit. I'm going to end up with less from the garden. And so this is something you may want to think about from that soil test, depending on the crop, you may need to come back through and add more nutrient later on.
When would that be? Like mid-June or when?
Well, it's different per crop. So like I said, lettuce, not so much because you're just harvesting the leaves. You may want to come back in with lettuce. If you harvest it as baby lettuce and you're wanting to regrow and harvest again, you may want to come in and add some more nutrient. Tomatoes, and I know we're talking about early spring crops today, but like tomatoes, you do that when the fruit first develops. Or squash and cucumbers, you do that when the fruit first develops. Beets and radishes, it's when that starts to bulb up. and you start to see that bulb. And that, particularly with beets, phosphorus is a huge issue because that's root development. And you want that root to develop as much as it can. It may be nitrogen. You want to keep those leaves green and growing. All right. So you can do that in a lot of different ways. Organic recommendations, adding compost. So as you go through and you weed your garden, add more compost, dig it in, chop it into the soil. You can add more amendments, blood meal, bone meal. You can irrigate in with water-soluble organic fertilizer or fish emulsion. There are lots of different ways to do this, but think about this when I look at that soil test. That soil test is primarily focused in nitrogen right here, and realize that soil test is not all-inclusive. If you read the fine print, you go read the field notes on certain crops, it'll tell you that you've got to add more at this reproductive stage than what that soil test is telling you. If it was conventional, I would tell you, when it comes time when the beets are bulbing or the onions are beginning to bulb or whatever, and you're seeing some nitrogen deficiency, then you add so much triple 10, like a teaspoon of triple 10 per 10-foot of row or whatever. With the organic recommendations, it's more of over time, you're just making sure it's there. So it may be that every couple of weeks you add a little bit of compost, or you water in with some fish emulsion, liquid fish emulsion. That's kind of my go-to recommendations, but it really does depend upon the crop. Here's these organic sources of nitrogen fertilizer that we can use. This is one that I found. This is a water-soluble organic fertilizer called Grower's Secret. By the way, none of these names are meant to promote these brands. It's just stuff that I found. The Daddy Pete's, I know it's available. That's why you see that a lot. I'm not recommending that. I'm not pushing that. There may be other products out there that work just as good, but I know that's a good product and it's available locally. That's why I put it on there. But none of these name brands or none of these product names, I'm just giving you examples. So there may be others out there that you can find with an Amazon search, which is where all this, except for the Daddy Pete's picture, came from, was an Amazon search. Here's an example of blood meal, this high yield blood meal 1200. I found one from Walmart that was 13%. Like I said, I found one from Lowe's, it's 16%. There may be some other companies like Johnny's Seeds or companies that specialize in organic gardening that they may have a better mix of this. They may have a quick release, or they may have 16% blood meal. I will warn you, one thing on the blood meal, though, it is blood meal. So understand that if you put that out there, it may cause rodents to come into your beds. It may attract other things because it's going to have the smell's not predominant when you open the bag, but animals can smell that. It is a natural product. So understand that's a risk. If you have to put a lot of it out there, that is a risk. You may be bringing in some things. Alfalfa meal is another one. Alfalfa meal, this was one that was analysis was 312, not very much nitrogen. But that may be something over time that you add more nitrogen. That might be a good side risk, and you come in with a little bit each week of alfalfa meal and put it around the plants. The other option to add nitrogen, and it's not so much a good option for early season crops in a traditional garden, because remember I said you had to plow in the fall. But one of the things you can do in a traditional garden for later on, or you can do this in the fall and plow it in, would be something like crimson clover or a cover crop. I'm real hesitant to recommend cover crops for raised beds, just simply because everything's usually done by hand. And you just about can't incorporate a cover crop by hand. You have to use machinery somehow, either a garden tiller, a DCS tiller, a tractor, a garden tractor, something like that. So I'm real hesitant to say something about cover crops. You can add amendments, though. You can add alfalfa meal, for instance. And that'd be similar to adding, plowing in clover. So I would really go more the amendment route with the raised beds. These are just a few examples. Like I said, there's plenty out there. We haven't done research on all of these. NC State hasn't done research on all of these. So the information we have is quite limited. But they're out there. I always follow the label directions on these products. somebody has researched it enough to give you a recommendation on that label and give you instructions. Any question on amendments before I move forward? Okay. So these are just some of my favorite varieties. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is really, I'm going to cover this logo up because this is David Davis right here. Okay, this is not really, you could say it's NC State. It's my experience. This is my personal experience from growing these crops. And this is what I would like to put in my home garden. All right. And I've just got a couple of each. There are others. There are many notable varieties out there. Don't get offended if your variety is not in this list, but these are some that's come out in recent years that I really like that you may want to try. And that's why I'm including them in today's class. With their cabbages, I really like Superstar cabbage. If you ever grew Rio Verde cabbage, this is the replacement for Rio Verde. This is a cabbage that can be harvested as a small 8 to 12 pound head, or you can let it grow to a 16 to 18 pound head. It won't bust through the middle. When it busts around the stalk. And so basically you could leave it out there all summer long and it just keep getting bigger until you're ready to make crown out of it. Mm-hmm. Or, you could harvest it as a small head and make your boiled cabbage or cabbage soup or cabbage casserole, whatever you want to make. And so that's why I like it. It's very versatile. You can use it as a small head in an early summer dish, or you can use it as a big head to make crown. If I just want a good early season variety that grows quick, it's going to make really quick, this is the one that I go with now. I used to say Stonehead. The problem with Stonehead is it busts through the middle. And it'll get a certain size and it'll bust all the pieces. It's a good cabbage. It tastes good, but it busts all the pieces. This Grand Vantage doesn't get very big. It has a really dark blue-green color, so it's really pretty if you're going to put it in a slaw or a salad, if you need a green cabbage for that. So I really like it. It's a good early season variety. It's cool and cold tolerant. So this will be the first one that I would plant. It's the first one we do plant for us. The major problem with this one, it does resist busting, but there is going to come a point where it's going to bust through the center of the head. But if you wanted something, this makes in like 50-something days, like 52 days or something like that. So it's a really, really good early season variety. When you get to broccoli, my two go-tos, Castle Dome. I really like Castle Dome if I'm planting in April. Castle Dome, as the name suggests, the head is rounded. Castle Dome, that's why it has the name. I really like that because all the water will run off. There's a few out there. Lieutenant is one variety you may run into. I'm trying to think of the old one. My mind's blank right now. Can't think of it. But there are a few premium crop. Premium crop broccoli is another one. It almost has a flat head with a bowl in the center when it makes a head. The problem with that one is if it's making a head and it's ready to go and it rains, that water will puddle up in there in a matter of a couple hours. If the sun comes out, it will scorch the top of that head. It'll make it look black, which it doesn't affect the eating quality, but it does hurt the looks. Castle Dome has a rounded head shape and all the water runs off. It won't beat up on the head. It also loves heat. You can plant this one in the early spring and grow it through the summer. You can plant it late spring, grow it into the summer. So it's versatile. You can grow it spring or summer or fall because it also has this cold vigor. So it's tolerant of freeze and frosty winds. Has a great holding ability. Emerald Crown is my second go-to. It's more of a fall cabbage, but you can use it very early in the spring. So if I wanted cabbage to plant March the 1st in the garden, Emerald Crown is what I'm going to go to. And that's primarily why I recommend this one is because of that cold tolerance. It resists freeze and frost really, really well. You've got the kale that grows kind of a stem-like growth. You've got the kale that grows in a bunch, all right? For a home garden, you would probably like the varieties that grow the more stem-like growth. I don't like them because they have a huge midrib, and you have to spend all that time getting that center of the leaf out before you fix that kale, before you put it in a salad or fry it or whatever you're going to do. Both of these varieties have a less prominent rib in the leaves, midrib, but they are both bunch type. And so these aren't the ones that you pick the leaf off. These are the ones when it gets ready, you cut the whole bunch. You take the whole bunch out. So it produces a lot at once. I like Darkivore in the spring, which is what this one is that I'm mentioning here. It resists bolting, it resists yellowing. And so if you do get up, kale takes anywhere from 72 to 85 days before it makes. So I like this Darkivore in the spring because you're going to get up into the warm months before you harvest. You're going to get into June and July before this is ready to harvest, and it won't bolt as readily. So you can leave it in the field longer. You can leave it in the garden longer. You can put you 12 or 13 of these out and go out and cut one at a time as you make your salad over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, or as you're making whatever dish with kale. My second one, if you can't find the Darkivore, is the Aroon. It has a really beautiful dark color. If you're doing a kale salad, it has a beautiful dark color. It's a very vigorous growth. It's going to grow a pretty large plant. It has a larger leaf, so there's more to it, but it takes heat really, really well. And that's really what we need because we have such diverse environment. We go from really cold to somewhat hot. We can grow kale, broccoli, and cabbage all year round. We can grow it 12 months of the year in certain cases, like if you had a high tunnel or a greenhouse. You can almost do that. You can grow it from March. I've cut broccoli on Thanksgiving before. So we have a really good climate for growing broccoli, kale, and cabbage here in the mountains. And it tastes a little sweeter, I think. It tastes a little better. On my lettuce mixes, these are 2 that I recommend. I will recommend Harris Seed Company for organic seeds. Seedway is another company that has a lot of organic seeds. Johnny's is a company that has a lot of organic seeds. When it comes to this lettuce, this is the best mix that I saw for the best price. And that's why I recommend these. That's why I grow it. But there are some very notable mixes out there when you're talking about salad blends. Rupp Seeds has one. Johnny's has one. Stokes has one. I mean, there's a bunch of companies. You could go to the local feed store and find a good lettuce mix. There's a lot of them out there. But I really like this Harris blend. It makes a really good salad mix. It's got a lot of color. It's got 6 different types of lettuces, arugula, romaine. That's purely lettuce there. You could mix in, actually I was saying you could mix in arugula. The blend doesn't contain arugula, but you could mix in arugula or some of like the Japanese mustards or something like that if you want to add a little spice. The Harris microgreens mix, it has a good spicy flavor, but it's mostly your chard, beets, arugula, red kale. It has a little bit of lettuce, so it's got all these other greens in it. It does have more of a spicy, prominent bite to it when you eat it. So if you like that, if you want that flavor, that's what I would go with. You can add some things into these mixes, pak choy, bok choy, some of your Asian greens, and it makes for a really, really good salad. I like to eat this. That's why I recommend it. Here's my green onions. Of course, the traditional Southport white bunching. It's easy to establish from seed. You basically, when I'm doing transplants, I'll actually go through, if I'm going to transplant this in 5-12 seed tray, and I'll put like 5 seed to a hole. And when I plant those plants, 4 or 5 plants in a space planting, I basically have one bunch of onions ready to go. Nice. And that's production. In your garden, you can just go out there and, use your earthway seeder, put the onion plate on it, go through there, whatever brand, Hess brand, whatever you're using, put the onion seed in, put the seed out there in a nice little row. And you're not going to go wrong with that Southport white bunching. If I want a pencil onion, I really like this Parade onion. You can get it organic and non-organic, treated or untreated. Parade, the main reason I like it for pencil onions is pencil onions tend to be subject to basil rot or pink rot. And so that's why I recommend this for a pencil onion. In our wet environment, we have a lot of basil and pink rot. So that's my go-to there because of the disease resistance. Get the celery, Victoria, that's what I grow. Victoria is my early season. This is the one I seed in the greenhouse, usually in February. I'll plant it here probably in about 1 or 2 weeks. It's a good early season variety. You get quick germination. And by quick, I mean it takes like 24 days for this stuff to germinate. It takes celery a really, really long time to germinate. Hudson is my summer variety. It's just simply because it's heat tolerant. If I'm planting or if I'm seeding any celery in March or April, this is what I'm seeding because it's not going to make until August. It has a long, celery is very slow growing, but Hudson won't bolt. It'll actually make celery before it bolts. And that's the 2 varieties I use. Tall Utah, your Utah Tall is probably the one that most people are aware of and know of. Both Victoria and Hudson are those Utah Tall type celery plants. It's kind of like what you buy in the grocery store. Carrots, you typically want to get those used for fresh market, and that's the ones that you're harvesting the carrot and the top as well. There's some neat videos if you want to try it on how you can eat carrot tops. There's people that actually use them, fry them, make them. Carrot tops are so strong, I can't do that. But if you want to try it, go ahead. Otherwise, most of the time that top is just for appearance. But they work better in the home garden. If you want to harvest baby carrots, small carrots, you want to use these Nantes type. Nantes type carrots are really, really sweet. Some examples of Nantes type will be Nintendo, Negovia, Negovia Hybrid, and the Scarlet Nantes. Those are available from lots of different seed companies. But if you don't go with these varieties, look for that Nantes type. I mean, that's really what you want. If you want the baby carrots, the real sweet baby carrots. Baby carrots that you buy in the grocery store aren't baby carrots. Y'all realize that. It's actually the culls that they grind down into baby carrots. So it's not small harvested carrots. But these that you grow in your garden taste so much better, as sweet as could be. I encourage you to try to grow some carrots if you've never tried. There's also the slicer types. If you want a bigger carrot that takes longer to grow, my go-to are Olympus and Enterprise. And then there's all the specialty types. Now, if you really want to grow carrots and you like to cook carrots, you like to cook with carrots, or you want to add color to salads or whatever, you can't go wrong with a rainbow blend. It's got lots of different colors. These are actually really, really high. If you look up rainbow carrots sometime from a nutritionist, they're really, really high in lots of different vitamins and different things. They actually have more than a regular carrot does. And they have lots of different colors. Rainbow blend is actually a mixture of deep purple, white satin, and Yellowstone, and your regular slicer type carrot. I'm not sure what the variety is, but it's actually just a mixture of that seed. But there's also a rainbow blend that's more of a heirloom type variety. Any of those will work. Purple haze is one that has an orange inside and a purple outside. It's really pretty just to slice up. You can get kids really interested in eating carrots with those because they look different. White satin, it's white satin. It's an almost white with a little bit of yellow tinge to it. Yellowstone is a bright yellow carrot. And all of these, they're carrots, but they have a little different flavor. For instance, the rainbow carrots aren't as pungent. They don't have that right in the face kind of taste. I'm just highlighting a few pests. There's by far many more, but these are some of the most common. Cabbage looper, I would even throw in army worm, diamondback moth. This is really big on a lot of your spring cole crops, turnips, brassicas, those kinds of things. If you want to know what a cabbage looper is, it's a little inchworm. That the tradition says if you find a cabbage looper like crawling across your shoe, it's measuring you for a new shoe or whatever. I don't know if you've ever heard that or not. There's a saying my grandmother used to tell me. But it's also the white butterfly that you see flying around in the spring and the summer months. I've already seen some flying around this year, so they are here. The one thing I want to highlight is traditionally we've controlled these pretty well organically with BT. So Dipel or BT spray. It's an OMRI certified product. However, now it will not control this. We're seeing where you're having vast control failures with this. BT is basically when the worm eats the BT on the cabbage leaf. it basically causes it to die of diarrhea, which is a horrible thing to think about, but that's what happens. They're becoming resistant to it. Our NC chemical manual doesn't have any other recommendations that are organic certified for cabbage looper. So this is a problem. The one thing I'll say, if you're trying to do these crops organic, especially cold crops, it's going to be really, really hard for pest management. So don't expect to grow the perfect cabbage. About the best thing that you can do, the hardest thing that you can do, but about the easiest thing is to go out and hand pick these things and kill them. And you're still going to have damage. You're always going to have damage. They can do a lot of damage just in a day, and they can explode. The population explode pretty quickly. Diamondback, armyworm, diamondback moth, that's another one. The armyworm is separate from the diamondback moth. And BT will not work on either one of those. That's really more of a summertime thing. You see that more in the summertime because those moths kind of migrate in when our weather changes, when it warms up. I've not seen any of that this time of year. Armyworm is really more of a fall pest, but you can occasionally see it in very wet springs. You'll see armyworm come out a little bit early sometimes. The one thing I'll say on all these is there's no organic recommended products in the state of North Carolina. Everything is just, it's not organic. So this might be one of those that you'll have to diverge a little bit if you don't want to go certified. If you have a bad population problem to get control of it, you may have to go something that's a non-organic recommendation. Okay. One thing you may try is Pyganics. It's kind of like the pyrethrum. It's the natural derivative. We're still seeing very limited effectiveness. It's just very limited effectiveness. So this is a broad spectrum. Be careful with this. This can hurt some pollinators, bees in particular. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe for pollinators. Harlequin bug is another one that I often get a lot of questions about on cold crops and spring crops. You'll see it come out. It'll just cover collards, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. It can devastate that plant, one plant at a time. It can just take over, and you will see these things in number. I mean, I've seen cabbages that have 25 or 30 harlequin bugs. Again, nothing certified organic. In the chemical manual, Pyganics is about the only thing I could recommend. This is one of those that if you have it, though, you definitely want to think about going and getting something to control the population. My strategy would be wait until you have sufficient levels. Wait till you see it's going to be a problem threshold. When you start to see 10 or 12 of these things, you need to treat it pretty quickly. Even what we have in the conventional side of gardening or production, it often takes 2 or 3 applications to get these things because it only treat the adults. So just keep that in mind. They are hard to control. Aphids, I see a lot of aphids on spring crops coming out. The good thing about aphids is they're fairly easy to control. You can control them with insecticidal soaps or neem oil for labeled crops. And it works because aphid is a sucking insect, and the insecticidal soaps basically wash them off. Aphids can't get there. They're transported usually by ants. And so the insecticidal soaps will actually wash it off the plant. The thing about aphids, though, is they can populate in a hurry. I've seen pictures where an adult had a female that was having a baby while it was being born. I mean, it's just crazy how quick these things can populate. And all these aphids they're not bisexual reproduction. They're basically clones, which is really, really weird. Aphid, if you want to see something about a weird insect, a weird world, study about an aphid. It's one of the weirdest insects out there. But insecticidal soap can work pretty well. Neem oil, but make sure it's labeled. You don't want to hurt the crop. There's certain vegetable crops that neem oil is not labeled for. Flea beetles, another one you see a lot in the spring on spring crops. You'll see this with holes in the potato leaves. Again, unfortunately, there's not many organic options for treating this. And I hate to be a broken record, but there's just not. There's nothing that really works that I could say, here's your silver bullet. And then we'll talk a little bit about management strategies here in just a minute. The one thing I do want to say though, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, just because it's an organic pesticide, that doesn't equal safe. An organic pesticide like Pyganics, for instance, or some of your natural permethrin type products, they are still considered poisons. An insecticide works by poisoning the insect, right? And so just because it's labeled organic, that doesn't mean it's safe for bees, doesn't mean it's safe for pollinators, it doesn't mean it's safe for you. They're all really just naturally derived. So instead of being man-made products, like a lot of our insecticides, fungicides, those things are, it's just it's either plant derived or some kind of natural made compound. There are nicotine-based compounds out there that were considered organic at one time that were insecticides. I mean, they were labeled insecticides. And so even though it's an organic product, I always remember the label is the law. This is what I tell producers, this is what I tell homeowners. I can't recommend a product that's not labeled.
Max, I see
A classic example is vinegar and salt instead of Roundup. Now, I can't recommend those homeopathic type remedies because I don't have a label to go with that. Anything that's going to go on a garden crop that you're going to use as a treatment, I can't recommend it unless it's got a label with it. Some people were even saying, well, I'll just spray Clorox, as a fungicide. Don't do that. It's not labeled as a fungicide. It could hurt your plants. It could hurt you. It cannot be safe for you. So I always look for a label with any of these chemical treatments. Some alternative practices, and this is really the direction you want to go in organic exclusion. There is insect netting out there you can use for crops that don't need to be pollinated. Lettuce, cabbage, collards, any of those kind of spring crops, even your onions. Onions don't really have too many pests. That's a good thing about onions. They're mostly pests in the soil, but your cabbages, those kinds of things, you can use insect netting. One thing I'll say about this though is if you don't keep that netting, keep the insects out of the netting, you can create a nice safe place for them to breed if they ever get in there. So making sure you exclude whatever pest you're trying to exclude is pretty important. Really scouting, looking at those plants over and over and over every single day, every single evening, whatever, multiple times a day. When you go through and you find something, pick it off, kill it, get rid of it. That's going to be a really good way to approach this. It's just sometimes the battle is really hard to win, right? If they really start to get out of control. Using beneficials. Now, the only problem with this works for a lot of our native pests. Most of our pests aren't native. Harlequin beetle is not native. Japanese beetle is not native. The diamond moth, it's not native. And so we don't have beneficials that'll work on these. We don't have anything that you can go buy something and put it under your netting and keep it in there and it work. But that is an option for some pests. Rotation, definitely rotate. This is going to help with things like nematodes or some of your diseases like black rot. Don't plant the same thing in the same place over and over and over and over again. Rotate to something that's in a different family. For instance, where you have garlic after you harvest your garlic, you definitely don't want to put onions or anything in the allium family in there. You want to put something else in those beds for a year or two so you don't have basil rot, pink rot, all those kinds of things forming in those beds. And then the last is kind of your go-to, very last ditch effort is to strategically apply recommended pesticides. There comes a point where you may want to consider this. It just depends on how important it is to you. How important is it that you grow this cabbage or this lettuce? How important is it that it's the perfect plant? If you can get by and the insects eat it and I can just cut that off and I can eat it too, that's one thing. You can do that. So this is really just a personal choice, but you can strategically apply pesticides. One of the things that I'll say on any pest, when you find a pest, if you don't know what it is, you don't know how to treat it, you can always bring that to us. We have master gardeners that'll be here this summer. I'll be here. You can take a picture. You can email it to me. And, let me know. I want a recommendation. I'm trying to do organic, but what's your recommendation to control this pest? And usually I'm going to say if there is an organic recommendation or a recommended product or a procedure or whatever, management practice, I'll tell you that, but I also say you might want to consider treating with product X just to get a handle on the population. Diseases are concerned, bacterial infection of onion. A lot of people think that hot weather kills your onions and makes them start to die back at the top. That's actually not the case. When those tops start to die down, they start to get that brown veining. That's actually a bacterial infection. One of the ways you can prevent that, if you want to grow big onions, is spray them about once every 7 to 14 days with copper fungicide. Copper, you can get organic formulations of copper fungicide. It won't eliminate that disease, but it will greatly slow it down. And what this does is it goes down. If you've ever cut an onion in two, and you've had the white rings on the outside and then this nice little brown streak through the middle, that's this bacterial disease that I'm talking about. That's what that is. The same thing with garlic, the same thing with a lot of your olives. This bacteria will impact that. And we get that because we have really wet spring. We have really wet winters. We have lots of dew. We have lots of moisture. It makes our crops grow well because we have lots of moisture, but it also makes pathogens grow really well. That's why it's really hard to grow tomatoes in the mountains, because we have so much moisture. Damping off is usually a concern in the spring with some of our seedlings. There's similar diseases, some of those rots, some of those molds. It's so wet in the spring, it's really hard to control moisture. That's another reason why a lot of this, I would recommend plants and transplants over seedlings, over direct seeding, is because you can easily get dampened off and you can't do anything about it in the field with our spring moisture. Downy mildew is something that you probably haven't recognized. If you see your transplants that you put out there with cabbage or broccoli, and the leaves will start to droop down, and they'll be almost like a wet look to them, but they're wilting, but they're kind of wet and slimy a little bit. They'll turn really yellow on top. If you turn the leaf over, you may be able to see some mold up near the petioles of the leaves. And it's not going to be like a pronounced penicillin mold. You just about really have to see, but it'll look like a wet spot almost. It's something that I've seen a lot more of in recent years. If you plant plants out there and they have this kind of almost, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's almost like a rotted, wet look to the leaves, but they're turning real yellow and they're drooping and they're just not growing real fast. A lot of times that's downy mildew. You can take a sample and bring it in. There's not a lot you can do for downy mildew other than using clean seed, and there are some preventative fungicides. By the way, none of those preventative fungicides are homebrew certified. They're not organic. But that's one that I see a lot. Pink or basil rot, pretty much your only option there is to plant resistant varieties or change locations. Or change your soil. If you have a raised bed, you can change the soil out. But if you can get varieties that are pink or basil rot resistant and onion, that's where you'll see at the base of the root, right above that, it'll have this real pink color and almost looks like something's eaten into it. That's a rot. That's a fungus or a bacterial rot. It's a disease. So disease management strategies: use healthy transplants or certified seed. Keeping your own seed or your own bulbs or tubers, a lot of times that's a good way to transmit disease. Rotate your garden beds. Scout often. Use recommended or homebrew approved fungicides. This would be like copper, sulfur. There's several out there that work somewhat effective. But remember, the label's the law, and it needs to be labeled for the specific crop.